class, welcome to EdVantage. I'm Marie Huntsinger, and today we'll be discussing two important cultural terms, ethnocentrism and cultural relativism. Also, I will share some tips on how to increase your cultural sensitivity. Have you ever wondered, why on earth do people eat that, or wear that, or think that? If you have, you're not alone. You're practicing ethnocentrism, or judging another culture by your own culture standards. As sociologists, we must practice what Max Weber calls verstehen, or to understand. This is a critical concept in sociology, not just observing cultural practices, but trying to understand why they occur and what meanings or purposes they serve. This doesn't mean we have to agree with cultural practices, but we should at least try to understand them. Have you ever noticed that much of the hostility between groups comes from a lack of understanding or empathy? Learning to identify ethnocentrism in your day-to-day life can have benefits outside of sociology as well. Ethnocentrism can be positive for facilitating group solidarity and bonding. What would you do if I offered you up a hot plate of fried crickets? Would you say yum and grab a handful? If you're socialized in the United States, you would probably go, ick, no, or what? What would a Hindu in India say about many people in the United States eating a cow, an animal they consider sacred and respected? In most Indian states, cow slaughter is banned, while a steak and mashed potato meal is regular American fare. On the flip side, cultural relativism is understanding the practice from the culture's standards. Using the cricket example, bugs remain a traditional food in many cultures across Africa, Asia, and Latin America. A small study from the Center for Sustainability and the Global Environment at the University of Wisconsin-Madison has found that eating crickets can help improve gut bacteria and reduce inflammation. Think about it. Is it really so different than eating a lobster? Also, did you know a lobster was once considered food for poor people? It was fed to animals, prisoners, and indentured servants. This is just another example of a social construct that has changed over time. So what would a Christian American say about Hindus finding the cow sacred? They may not understand until they learn that cows provide protein and calcium-rich milk in a place where refrigeration is not as readily available. Bulls plow fields and help transport goods, and dung is used as fertilizer. For a Hindu in India, to revere the cow is to revere the culture. Here are some tips to move you from ethnocentrism to cultural relativism. If you get the chance to travel, do it, even if it's to a different part of town with different cultural norms or values. Talk to people about their way of life. To supplement travel, read, listen, or watch stories by or about people with a different background from you. There's a quote I like from Margaret J. Wheatley, and she says, "You can't hate someone whose story you know." Keep an open mind. You don't have to agree with a cultural practice to try to understand it. What value does it serve that particular culture? Be a student of culture. Research what gestures, language, eye contact, or touch may or may not be appropriate for a given situation or purpose or person. And finally, be quiet. Make sure you allow those from a different or marginalized groups a chance to speak. Ask honest questions, but respect that not everyone wants to play an expert for their social group. Last but not least, think about ways your culture is unique and how it may seem out of the ordinary to other cultures. Practice self-awareness, or make the familiar strange, as we learned about in a previous video. So what are some common characteristics of culture? One is culture is learned and shared. You're not born with a culture, but you learn it informally and formally. This process is called socialization. You learn culture informally through observation. Watching your dad shave or your mom put on makeup reinforces gender norms, for example. You learn culture formally through education or church. Also, you learn culture from engaging in media. Until you learn a culture, you are an outsider, whether an infant or an immigrant. A key characteristic of culture is that it is shared within members of a group and is transmitted through group interaction. Have you ever noticed that each workplace has a culture? You probably have a role in shaping that culture as well as being shaped by it. It's possible to create cultural change, but you need buy-in from those participating. What do you think of when you see the canned meat Spam? Do you think classy night out on the town? Anniversary dinner? Would you serve Spam to your prom date? For most people, no. Spam has a somewhat lower class negative connotation in American culture. What if I told you that in Korea, it is considered a luxury item? A nice gift for giving your boss for the holidays, for example, is a Spam gift set. Culture is symbolic. The meanings we attach to symbols vary culturally. One person's tacky meal is another's 5-star specialty. What about McDonald's? Your first restaurant choice? Would you have your wedding there? For some couples in Hong Kong, the answer is duh. A cake made of individually packaged apple pies, anyone? Culture varies across time and space. Humans are amazingly adaptable, and culture is a mix of the past and the present. Take, for example, weddings. People used to get married in their best clothes. It wasn't until Queen Victoria in 1840 that the white wedding dress became desired and mainstream on a wider scale. White dresses aren't very practical for people with not a lot of clothes because they show dirt. Today, people having their own spin on weddings, wearing Chuck Taylors underneath their gowns, having their dogs in their wedding parties, and doing flash dances down the aisle. What about the white Christmas? Well, how about a Christmas cruise instead? Santa wearing swim trunks? We hold on to traditions and rituals, but often update them with practices and material culture that makes sense for the modern times. We engage in thousands of cultural practices without thinking about them. Brushing your teeth in the morning, cultural practice. High-fiving your coworker for a job well done, cultural practice. Answering the phone with hello? You got it, cultural practice. When culture becomes second nature, that's called internalization. We no longer have to think about it. With everything we have going on in life, thank goodness for this. Could you imagine the mental energy it would take to think about how to clean your teeth or greet someone? We take culture for granted, which is why we're often shocked when confronted with a different cultural practice. Culture shock is a feeling of disorientation from being exposed or immersed in a new cultural setting. For example, coming into contact with a toilet that is just a hole in the ground, or not understanding the terminology in a college course. Culture lag is when problems occur from a culture not adapting fast enough to technological change. For example, new reproductive technologies. Take the case of a married couple who froze embryos for implantation later in life and then gets divorced. Who gets the right to the embryos? What if one wants to implant in hopes for a child and the other wants it destroyed? Who gets to decide? Another example would be laws barely catching up with the social problem of texting and driving. Many people have had to die from new distracted drivers before laws went into effect. Well, thanks for watching, and our next video will focus on dominant, sub, and countercultures. I'll see you then.